the night kind of started as like the water came up our block, which is weird because we're good 4 blocks away from the beach, which was kind of scary because I didn't realize that that sort of thing was going to happen. And all the wind was kind of out of control. And it got more and more serious as like we realized like it was coming up the stairs, and then like it was like almost at the porch, and the water just kept rising. Like my car alarm went off, meaning my car was flooded, and like everyone throughout the neighborhood, you could hear all of their cars were, you know, dying throughout the night. And I mean, that was kind of scary, but it didn't really like faze me. It wasn't like, because I can swim, and I felt that like, you know, I have a tall house, like whatever happens will be fine. And then as I'm looking out of my front door at the flood coming, rising and rising, I look in the distance, and there's like, the sky is like ablaze. So I go to my dad, I'm like, oh my God, that is a huge fire. And he's a firefighter, so he looks at me and he's like, okay, like is a car on fire? Like he didn't believe me. And then he looks out the door and he's like, oh my God, wow, like that's pretty unreal. So the next thing that really started to scare me and like kind of like made me like realize how like drastic things were getting was that ashes started like falling on our house, and eventually giant embers that were ablaze started like falling, and like there was smoke everywhere. It was kind of hard to see even inside of the house. So at that point we started to like try and like put out the ashes like with our feet, or like throwing buckets of water. And finally my dad leaned outside of our window and grabbed a garden hose from the backyard, and we have 2 of them actually, so he grabbed both of them, and he handed me a garden hose and was like, go upstairs and like just try and keep like the house like wet, like try and keep everything like as wet as possible, because this is a huge problem. Like there's no rain, nothing is going to put out the fire, like, so we have to do something. So then I was upstairs like dragging the garden hose like throughout my house, like spraying it as best I could on the roof and on the embers that were flying in the air, and on my neighbors' like roofs that I could reach. And so we were just like praying that the wind or the fire trucks could eventually like get through. We had no idea how that was going to happen because it was impossible to drive in that sort of situation. So I guess after a solid like 2 hours of just running around the house, we eventually saw fire trucks pull up completely like in the 5 feet of water, and I was like, oh, this is the moment, like that things are gonna be okay, like thank God, like someone's here to help us. And actually at that moment also the house next to us, behind our house, went on fire. And I looked at my dad and I'm like, I need to leave, like we need to get out of here now. So we got ourselves ready, like my dad took important documents like our social security cards, and we put them in plastic bags, went to our neighbor next door and was like, we're leaving. And we trudged through the waist-high water. At that point the water had receded a little bit to only about 4 feet that we could walk and not feel totally threatened. So we took our neighbor and we went about 3 blocks away and banged on our like a family member's door and was like, we need somewhere to be right now, can you take us in? And of course they took us in, and I just stayed up the entire night waiting to hear from my brother, who I knew was trying to get into the neighborhood and trying to like come and like see what he could do to help us. So I guess around 5:45 in the morning he finally banged on the door and was like, it was like such a moment of relief, like everyone I know is safe. And he was like, our house is still standing, like you guys like did a great job, like this is like everything's gonna be okay. So then I finally was able to at that point like take a couple hours and go to sleep. And when I woke up the next morning, thankfully all of the water had receded. There was no, there was the kind of a moment of like, what's going to be outside? Like, is there still going to be 6 feet of water? Like, what's going to happen? But luckily it was completely, dry and normal relatively. So then I made the trek back to our house, and just looked around, and like trees were down, power lines were down, like metal grates were like everywhere, and pieces of boardwalk and cars had floated up. And the entire time I'm walking back to my house, I'm wondering if it's gonna be there. Like, did another fire happen later, or did my brother not have all the information, or what have you? So I get back to my house, and like there it was, and that was a huge moment of relief too. We checked on our basement, and at that point there was still about 4 feet of water in our basement. But other than that, we completely lucked out. The only thing that was a shock was looking to the houses down the block and seeing that they were completely demolished. It was a little bit unreal, for sure.